It started the way ordinary days do, the kind you don't expect to remember. I was sitting in the corner of the coffee shop I'd been coming to since college, the one with the chipped tables and uneven floor that always made my cup tilt just slightly. Mornings there were routine. One coffee, plain, and 10 minutes of scrolling through texts I never sent. That's when she walked in. She wasn't new to me. She was my friend Daniel's mom, Elena. I'd seen her plenty of times at his house, waving from the kitchen, asking if we wanted sandwiches. But here, out of that familiar setting, she looked different. Not staged, not playing the role of someone's mom. Just herself. She carried her scarf loosely around her shoulders, hair pinned up like she hadn't cared too much, though I knew she always did. She ordered tea, not coffee, and I remember how she leaned slightly closer to the barista so she wouldn't have to raise her voice. I watched her hands more than I should have, small, quick movements, tapping against the counter while she waited. When she turned and noticed me, her face broke into a smile that lasted a beat longer than polite recognition. "You're here early," she said, walking over. I shrugged, fumbling with the lid of my cup. "Habit, I guess." It wasn't much of an answer, but it was enough. She sat down across from me, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. We talked about nothing at first. Traffic, Daniel's new job, how the weather was colder than expected. But in the pauses, something unspoken hung there. Her eyes didn't dart around the room like most people's. She held them steady, almost too steady, like she was waiting to see if I'd flinch. At one point, she noticed my napkin folded neatly into fourths on the table. "You always do that?" she asked, tilting her head. I glanced down and laughed softly. "Yeah, I guess. Never thought about it." "It's careful," she said. Not teasing, not judgmental, just noticing. And it stuck with me, the way she noticed. The conversation drifted, but my chest felt tight, like something important was happening even if the world outside was still half asleep. Her tea sat untouched, steam fading into the air. She didn't rush, and neither did I. When she finally stood to leave, she touched the table with her fingertips, just a graze of wood, but it felt like it anchored the moment. "Well," she said softly, "it was good running into you." "Yeah," I replied. My voice cracked, quieter than I meant. She gave the smallest smile, eyes narrowing just enough to suggest she'd heard it. And then she leaned slightly closer, like sharing something meant only for me. "This stays between us," she murmured. Her words weren't loaded, not yet. They could have meant the coffee shop, the conversation, the way she'd lingered a little too long. But I felt the weight of them, pressing against my ribs. By the time I looked up again, she was already outside, scarf pulled tight, disappearing into the gray morning. My coffee had gone cold, untouched at my side. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over Daniel's name, then pulling away. No text, no explanation, just her voice echoing, softer now, but impossible to forget. "This stays between us." I didn't expect to see her again so soon. 2 days later, Daniel had invited me over to watch the game, but he bailed at the last minute. "Work thing," he said. I was already near his place, though, so I stopped by to return the book I'd borrowed months ago and never opened. It felt like a decent excuse, nothing strange about it. When she opened the door, Elena tilted her head, surprised but not unwelcoming. "Oh, it's you." Her smile was easy, though her eyes flicked down to the book in my hand, like she knew it was more excuse than reason. "Daniel asked me to drop this back." I lied halfway. She let me in anyway. The house was quiet, warm in the way places are when people live alone. I'd always been there with noise, friends, video games, music spilling down the hall. Now, the silence was the first thing I noticed. "You want tea?" she asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "Sure," I said, though I wasn't really thirsty. I leaned against the counter while she filled the kettle, watching her move with a kind of practiced stillness. Divorce, I remembered. Daniel had mentioned it in passing once, months ago, his voice flat. I hadn't asked questions. "Strange being here without him?" she asked over her shoulder. "A little," I admitted. "Feels different." She glanced at me then, soft but searching. "It's quieter, isn't it?" The kettle clicked. She poured the water, handed me a mug. Her fingers brushed mine, only lightly, but enough to jolt something I pretended not to notice. We sat at the kitchen table. For a while, we just sipped. It wasn't uncomfortable, exactly, but every silence stretched out, almost daring one of us to fill it. Then she surprised me. "You know," she said, looking down at her tea, "when Daniel was little, this house never felt empty. Even when my ex was away, there was always noise, mess, laughter. I used to complain about it. Now," she trailed off, giving a small, humorless laugh. "Now I'd give anything for that kind of noise again." Her voice wasn't dramatic, just factual, like she'd been carrying it too long and let it slip. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just nodded, holding my cup tighter than necessary. And somehow, my silence seemed to give her permission. "You're lucky, you know, to still have the kind of friendships where you show up at someone's door for no reason." Her eyes flicked to mine then, and lingered. "That doesn't last forever." The words sat heavy. I wondered if she meant Daniel, or me. I caught myself imagining things I shouldn't. Sitting here like this on purpose, her waiting for me, not her son. The thought felt wrong, but it stayed. I cleared my throat. "You ever miss it less over time?" She tilted her head. "Miss what?" "Being seen, I guess." Her expression softened, almost painfully. She set her cup down, fingers tracing the rim absently. "No, you just get better at pretending you don't." Her honesty cut deeper than I expected, and I felt this wave of something, recognition, maybe, or longing. I wanted to ask more, but the words stuck. The clock on the wall ticked, loud in the pause. Outside, a car passed, then nothing again. Finally, she gave me an out. A half smile. "Listen to me. You came to drop off a book, and I'm dragging you into old stories." I shook my head quickly. "No, I don't mind. Really." We both stood at the same time, almost colliding. She laughed quietly, brushing past me to set her mug in the sink. When she turned back, her hand brushed my arm. Brief, deliberate, or maybe not. "Thanks for the company," she said. "Any time," I murmured, though I knew I shouldn't have. On the way out, I looked back once. She was still standing in the doorway, watching. Not smiling this time, just watching, like she was memorizing the moment before it slipped away. Later that night, lying awake, I thought about her words. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time, it wasn't planned either. I was walking past her house late in the evening, half on purpose, half not, when I noticed her porch light was still on. She was outside, bent over a small plant on the railing, brushing soil from her hands. When she looked up, her face shifted from concentration to surprise, then to something softer. "You're out late," she said. "So are you," I answered. My voice caught, quiet in the cool night. She motioned me over. I hesitated, then climbed the steps. The air smelled faintly of earth and tea. She held the plant toward me, almost like proof. "Can't keep this thing alive." Thought maybe fresh air would help. Her hand was dirt-smudged, fingertips dark. Without thinking, I reached for the small towel on the chair and offered it to her. She smiled, brief, almost shy. Silence again. We sat down side by side, the wooden porch creaking under our weight. Close enough I could hear her breathing. Not touching, but near enough that my arm burned with awareness. For a while, nothing. Just crickets, a car in the distance. Then her voice, low. "Daniel says you're looking for a new place. Closer to campus." "Maybe," I muttered. "The commutes, it's fine. Just feels far sometimes." She nodded, eyes fixed ahead. "Things change." Her voice trailed, heavier than the words should have been. I wanted to ask if she meant me, if she meant us, but the words tangled before they left my mouth. Instead, I said, "You ever think about leaving?" Her laugh was soft, almost startled. "All the time." Then, quickly, she looked at me. The moment stretched, sharp with things unsaid. She shifted slightly closer, her knee brushing mine. Not accidental. And then, footsteps. Daniel. His voice carrying faintly from down the street, talking into his phone. He hadn't seen us yet, but the sound was enough. Elena straightened, pulling her hands into her lap, gaze dropping. I mirrored her, heart hammering, pretending to study the plant like it held the answer. By the time Daniel passed by without glancing up, the spell was broken. She stood, brushing her palms against her jeans, suddenly brisk. "You should get going." she said lightly, though her tone didn't quite land. I nodded, stood too quickly. Yeah, right. But when I turned to leave, her hand brushed my sleeve, barely there, stopping me. My chest tightened. She opened her mouth, closed it again. A beat too long. I thought, this is it. The air thickened, her eyes searching mine. Just enough tilt in her stance, just enough pause. But then she pulled back, folding her arms across herself. Good night, she whispered. I walked down the steps, not looking back, afraid if I did, I wouldn't keep walking. And all the way home, the almost lingered louder than anything else that it was late afternoon when I ran into her again, this time in the small park near her street. She was sitting on a bench, hands tucked in her jacket pockets, staring at the ground like she was reading something only she could see. I almost kept walking. Almost. But then she looked up, and it was too late. Sit, she said, patting the spot next to her. I did. The bench was cold, wood-worn smooth from years of strangers. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of kids playing far off, their laughter fading with the breeze. Finally, she sighed. Daniel doesn't come around much anymore. I glanced sideways. Work? She shook her head slowly. Work. Friends. New things. I don't blame him. But, her voice faltered, just for a second. It's strange, realizing you've become the background of someone's life. I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. I'm sorry, I whispered. She gave me a small smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. Don't be. You'll understand someday. Something shifted then. A rawness I hadn't seen before. Her hands were trembling just slightly, and she folded them tighter in her lap to hide it. And before I could stop myself, I asked, do you ever feel lonely? Her head turned sharply. Our eyes met. No laugh, no brush off. Just stillness. Yes, she said simply. The words sat between us like it had weight. My chest ached. I wanted to say more. Wanted to tell her how often I thought of her, how much those silences stayed with me. But the words tangled. Instead, I said, me too. Her gaze softened, lingering. She leaned back against the bench, exhaling slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for years. You shouldn't, she said finally. You're young. You should be anywhere else. Not here, not with someone like me. I shook my head. That's not how it feels. She turned away, biting her lip. You don't know what you're saying. The quiet stretched. My hands were restless. I pulled at a loose thread on my sleeve, not knowing how to stop. When she finally spoke again, her voice was lower. Sometimes, when you're here, I forget how old I am. How wrong this is. The confession cracked something in me. I shifted closer, just slightly, knees brushing. She didn't move away. Her eyes closed for a second, then opened. This isn't fair to you, she whispered. It doesn't feel unfair, I said. Another silence. Another too long pause. I leaned forward. Only enough for the air to thicken, for the line to blur. She froze, her breath catching, lips parting just slightly. And then, she pulled back. Not far, just enough. Her hand brushed against mine on the bench, fingers twitching, not quite holding. She turned her face away. Don't, she whispered. Not a command. Almost a plea. I swallowed hard. Why not? Her answer never came. Just silence. And in it, a question neither of us dared finish. The next week, she wasn't there. No morning tea at the cafe. No light on the porch. No quiet bench in the park. I told myself it was coincidence, but after 4 days, it felt deliberate. I texted Daniel once, something casual. How's your mom? He replied with a thumbs up, and she's fine. Nothing else. But it didn't feel fine. I tried walking past her house again, slower this time. Curtains drawn. Porch empty. Not even the struggling plant she'd fussed over. By the 5th day, I stopped trying. Told myself it was better that way. But then came Saturday, and my phone buzzed with her name. Just one line. Can you come by? My chest tightened. I typed yes before I thought it through. When I got there, she was already at the door. No smile this time. Just tired eyes, darker than usual. She let me in, closing the door softly behind me. I shouldn't have asked you here, she murmured. Then why did you? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Just walked to the table, where a stack of papers lay. Divorce forms, maybe, or bills. She pushed them aside quickly, like she didn't want me to see. Finally, she said, because I needed someone. And that scared me. I froze. Needed. The word echoed too loud. You could talk to Daniel, I offered weakly. Her laugh was short, brittle. Daniel doesn't know me anymore. Then, quieter, neither does anyone. The air felt heavy, pressing down. I wanted to reach for her, but she stepped back, as if she'd felt the thought. You shouldn't be here, she said again. Then why? Because it's easier to tell you things, she cut in, her voice sharp now. And I don't know if that's fair. To either of us. We both stood in the silence. My hands curled into fists at my sides, not from anger, but because I didn't know where else to put them. Finally, she said, almost to herself, you remind me of the person I used to be. And that hurts. Her eyes glistened, though no tears fell. She turned quickly, pretending to straighten the stack of papers again. I wanted to ask what she meant, but the word stuck. I wanted to tell her not to hide from me. But instead, I said nothing. When I left, she didn't walk me to the door. Didn't linger, didn't touch my sleeve. I stood outside a moment longer, hand hovering over my phone, wanting to text her. To say something, anything. But I didn't. I shoved the phone back in my pocket. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The week after the park bench, things changed. At first, I thought it was nothing. A skipped day at the cafe, curtains drawn earlier than usual, no light on the porch. Everyone gets busy. Everyone hides sometimes. But then it stretched. 3 days. 4. A week. And I realized it wasn't chance anymore. It was distance. Deliberate. I caught myself walking slower past her house, eyes flicking toward the windows, waiting for the smallest sign. There was nothing. Just silence. Daniel mentioned her once in passing, over text. Mom's fine. Just busy. But his words felt too quick, too clipped. Like he hadn't looked closely. Or didn't want to. I thought about knocking. Standing on her porch, waiting until she opened the door. But something stopped me every time. The fear that maybe she wouldn't. That maybe she'd already decided what we were, or weren't. And then, on a Thursday night, my phone buzzed. Can you come by? 2 seconds. That's all it took for me to type yes. When I got there, she opened the door before I could knock. No smile, no warmth, just tired eyes and a faint smell of wine in the air. She stepped aside silently, letting me in. The living room looked different. A suitcase leaned against the wall, half-zipped. Papers spread across the table, legal documents, bills, things she pushed together quickly as if I hadn't seen. You're leaving? I asked before I could stop myself. She hesitated, then shook her head. Not yet. Just sorting. We sat. She didn't offer tea this time. She didn't even sit close. She perched on the edge of the couch, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor. Finally, she said, I wasn't going to call you. Then why did you? Her laugh was short, brittle. Because I needed to. And I hated that I needed to. I didn't move. My chest felt tight. Why? Because it isn't fair, she said quickly, her voice cracking on the word. To you. To me. To Daniel. Her son's name landed between us like a stone. It was the first time she'd said it in this context, like a reminder of the line we'd both been pretending not to see. I swallowed. You think I don't know that? Her eyes snapped to mine then, sharp, wet at the edges. Do you? Because I can't afford to forget. Not for a second. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. She folded her arms tight, as if holding herself together. I wanted to tell her that I thought about her every day. That she wasn't just Daniel's mom. That when she said she felt unseen, I saw her clearer than anyone. But the words tangled, dying in my throat. She stood suddenly, crossing to the table. Her hand hovered over the suitcase zipper, then dropped. You remind me of the person I used to be, she said quietly. And that hurts. The line pierced me. I didn't know whether to move closer or further away. I didn't know if she meant it as rejection or confession. Instead, I sat frozen while she straightened the papers unnecessarily, avoiding my gaze. After a while, she whispered, You should go. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't cold. It was tired. Final. I nodded, though every part of me resisted. I stood, waiting for her to stop me, to say something, anything, but she didn't. At the door, I hesitated. My phone buzzed in my pocket, A message from Daniel of all people. You around tomorrow? The timing felt cruel. I almost told her. Almost confessed everything right there, the truth spilling out before I lost the chance. But her back was turned, her shoulders rigid. So I didn't. I stepped outside into the night, air colder than I remembered. On the walk home, I typed a message. I don't care if it's wrong. I just don't want it to end like this. But I never sent it. I just stared at the words, thumb hovering, before erasing them. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence that I don't know what made me go back that night. Maybe the way she hadn't walked me out. Maybe the half-zipped suitcase I couldn't stop picturing. Maybe because silence stretched too long, and silence has a way of making you desperate. Her porch light was off when I arrived. For a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake. But then the door opened before I could knock. She stood there, hair loose, sweater pulled around her like armor. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. I know. My voice was steady, though my heart wasn't. But I couldn't. I stopped, shaking my head. I couldn't leave it like that. Her eyes closed for a beat. Then she stepped back. Come in. The kitchen light was dim, throwing soft shadows across the table. A mug sat abandoned near the sink, tea gone cold. She didn't sit. Neither did I. We just stood there, the quiet pressing against us. Finally, she broke it. Do you know how many times I almost called you? I swallowed. Probably the same number of times I almost showed up. A breathy laugh escaped her, tired, sharp. And yet, here we are. I stepped closer, just enough to close some of the space. Why are you pulling away? Her gaze snapped to mine, steady and trembling all at once. Because I don't trust myself when you're here. The words hit hard. She wasn't dramatic about it, just honest. And it made my chest ache. Elena, I started, but she shook her head quickly. You don't get it, she said, voice low, cracking. I've spent years keeping things in check, playing safe, being the person everyone else needed me to be. And then you. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter. You come here, and suddenly I'm not careful anymore. Her voice faded, but the meaning lingered. I moved closer, slow, not touching her yet. Do you think I don't feel that too? Her eyes searched mine, wary but soft. Then why are you still here? The question hung heavy. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. Because I see you. Not Daniel's mom. Not someone who has to hold everything together. Just you. And I can't pretend that doesn't matter to me. Her lips parted, but no sound came. A pause stretched, long enough for me to doubt everything I'd just said. Then she whispered, That's exactly why this is dangerous. I let the silence sit. I didn't push. I just waited. Finally, she turned, leaning back against the counter, shoulders slumped. Do you know what it feels like, she said quietly, to want something you shouldn't? Yes. My answer came too fast, too certain. Her eyes flicked to me, and something shifted in them. Not resolve, not surrender, something more human, more fragile. We stood there, both breathing shallow. The distance between us felt smaller than it was. Her hand slipped from the counter, brushing against mine. Not firm, not deliberate, just enough. My chest tightened. I didn't move away. She whispered, If we cross this line, we don't get to go back. I didn't answer right away. The clock on the wall ticked louder than my thoughts. Finally, I said, Maybe we don't need to. Her eyes closed, and she let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. When she opened them again, she didn't look away. We didn't kiss. We didn't confess love. But her hand stayed against mine, and when I curled my fingers just slightly, she let them. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Small, unsteady, real. Okay, she whispered. And that was enough. Time has a way of softening sharp edges. Weeks passed, then months. Things didn't break open with fireworks or collapse in silence. They just shifted. She didn't vanish anymore. Some mornings, I'd see her at the cafe again, ordering her tea the same way, leaning closer to the barista so she wouldn't have to raise her voice. She always noticed me before I noticed her, like she was already waiting. We never sat together at first. Just glances, quiet acknowledgments, the space between us a kind of truce. But slowly, routines overlapped. One day, she slid into the seat across from me without asking. Another day, I brought her a napkin before she could reach for one, folding it neatly into fourths like always. She smiled at that, small but knowing. Conversation stayed ordinary. Traffic, books, Daniel's latest updates. But layered beneath was something else. The kind of understanding that didn't need words anymore. I noticed the way she stopped rushing her tea, letting it sit longer, steam rising and fading like she finally had time. She noticed how I still stared at my phone sometimes, thumb hovering over unsent texts, but didn't ask. She didn't need to. One evening, we walked through the park again. The same bench where she once told me the truth about loneliness was empty, waiting. She hesitated before sitting, brushing leaves from the seat with her hand. Strange, she murmured. How places remember things. I sat beside her, the wood cool under my palms. Maybe they just hold them until we're ready. Her laugh was quiet, a little sad, a little grateful. We didn't say much else. Just sat until the sky dimmed, children's laughter fading the way it had before. But this time, there was no heaviness. Just calm. At 8:47 the next morning, I saw her again, our quiet coincidence. She was waiting at the cafe, scarf loose, hair pinned up without much care. She looked at me the way she had the very first time. Steady, too steady, and I realized it wasn't danger anymore. It was trust. She reached across the table, not dramatic, just enough for her fingertips to brush mine. No words, just that. And I held on, lightly, like we'd both learned the weight of small gestures. Life didn't suddenly transform. Daniel still called her less than he should. My commute was still too long. She still fought with her plants, and I still folded napkins without thinking. But there was a warmth now, woven through the days, like tea left to steep, like coffee cooling too slowly to drink. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't meant to be. But it was real. And that was enough. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear her voice from that first morning. This stays between us. Back then, it felt like a secret. Now, it feels like a promise.